There's a timeless call to cyberpunk. I'm talking about the subgenre, by the way. Thanks Mike Pondsmith for making that confusing for everyone, and CD Projekt somehow being allowed to copyright the name of an entire genre of fiction that's existed for decades, rather than that irredeemable dogshit train wreck. Like most people, my first and formative experience with the genre was watching the original Blade Runner as a kid. I must have been around 12 at the time, but art direction alone and set design of Blade Runner is sumptuous. It's so beautiful to just look at, and Ridley Scott had a run of films there which had an immeasurable impact on cinema and culture. I'm not discounting Neuromancer or Philip K. Dick, whose book is very, very different from the film, but to make a long story short, cyberpunk fiction has this incredible ability to balance visual flair with unprecedented thematic depth. There's room for everyone under the boot of megacorporations and a skyline lit by neon. When it comes to RPGs though, it's pretty slim pickings. Obviously you have the most overhyped game this side of Half-Life 3, the Deus Ex series, the occasional experiment like Remember Me, and some indie games or visual novels that double with the aesthetic. However, for scope and budget reasons as much as creative, it's probably one of the more difficult genres to realize. Enter Shadowrun Hong Kong. Right off the bat, I should make it clear I'm not that familiar with Shadowrun's setting or the tabletop. The trilogy that came out of the Kickstarter boom back in the 2010s is the only experience I've had with the IP, but the combination of fantasy races and concepts into a cyberpunk dystopian world is fascinating. You'd think it'd be jarring or anachronistic, but it works. Like I was talking about in that Morrowind video recently, it's weird in a way that's creative and engaging. Jordan Wiseman, the creator of Shadowrun, worked directly on the games through his studio Harebrained Schemes. To touch on the other two games briefly, the first game, Shadowrun Returns, was essentially a proof of concept and more to show off what the engine could do. It's a short, forgettable story, but there was a decent modding scene that built up around these games. The second one, Dragonfall, is set in Berlin and leaned more into the classic punk elements. I like it. I can see why a lot of people prefer it out of the three, but I feel the same way about it as I did Wasteland 3. A perfectly serviceable game that did a good enough job, but it's not particularly memorable. It was the final piece of the trilogy where things really came together, and that's what brings us here today, slipping through the shadows in the rain of Hong Kong, the strange, disturbing dreams that have crept into Teo's residence, and a family reunion many years in the making. To quickly summarize how these games work, Shadowrunners are essentially off-the-grid mercenaries who are hired to do wet work and all kinds of criminal jobs by the highest bidder. Most work in teams due to how lethal the job can be, and the setting provides various classes and specialities, decking for hackers, shamans and mages for spell casting, or meat and steel for those who want to get chromed up to the gills with augmentations. You could get a milk run to steal some artifact from a museum, plant blackmail material on a rival corporation, only to wind up fleeing from heavily armoured military personnel that belong to the highest bidder. Dragons lie sleeping beneath corporate megastructures. Trolls and orcs stand as bouncers outside nightclubs. Vampires, ghouls, magical storms are all a part of everyday life, and it blends together in this weird, wonderful melting pot of ideas. The biggest success of Hong Kong, however, is in its grounded story that gradually reveals its hand. Something that RPGs have been trying and mostly failing to do for as long as they've been around is contextualize the player's role without forcing them into a specific box. You have New Vegas, for example, which is famed for its freedom, only for Lonesome Road to come along and say, nope, you're tied to this guy now, and a place called Hopeville, and you should feel bad about it. Dragon Age 2 experimented with Hawke's family, but none of that ever really resonated with me, at least beyond getting Purple Hawk to annoy the hell out of Carver every chance I got. Dragon Age Origins blew 2077 out of the water with what a joke the life paths turned out to be, but there's a reason no one has come close to replicating that in over 15 years. Hong Kong succeeds where basically no other game has. To give you the basic setup, you are an orphan from the remnants of the United States, who, along with your close friend Duncan that you survived the streets together with, were taken under the wing of a man named Raymond Black. Here is where a lot of RPGs would stop, but Hong Kong goes to great effort to allow you to define what this relationship was like, and the history between you hangs over the game in a way that's surprisingly authentic and real. When the two of you are called to Hong Kong and you meet for the first time in years, you're pulled into events that are darker than just corporate scheming, as a being straight out of cosmic horror waits at the heart of the walled city in Kowloon. Like many of my favorite games, a lot of what makes Hong Kong so special is the character writing. You are given the option to recruit other Shadowrunners for a fee, but the squad here is the best of the trilogy. First, we have Isabelle. I spoke about this when I did that RPG Companions tier list video a while back, but she's probably the weakest of the bunch, mostly because of the overlap with my Decker assault rifle character. Nevertheless, her story is tied directly to the main plot around what's happening in the walled city and what Raymond has to do with it, so she's able to provide some interesting insight on the growing unease about what's been happening in the slums. Next up, we have the big sister vibes of Gobbet, a street rat, literally, in much the same way you and Duncan once were. Gobbet doesn't really have a filter and comes across in a way that shows she's confident in who she is. I've banged on about this over and over again before, but with how tiresome, snarky, smartass writing has become, Gobbet never falls into that trap. She's a character that was born to run the shadows and enjoys life as it comes. Gaichu is able to explore classic or traditional ideas of Japanese culture without ever feeling hammy or cliched. The fact he's a ghoul and eats human flesh is an interesting twist on the archetypal warrior, and not just subversive for subversion's sake. He's incredibly good in melee combat as well, and another standout in an already great cast. Unless you actually make an effort and explore the ship that acts as your home base, I mean, why wouldn't you? This is an RPG we're talking about here, guys. You may miss Rakta and Koshi. The fact the writers were able to pack so much into a single character is insane. In your conversations with him, you explore metaphysical concepts, transhumanism, or empathy that I can't think of any other game or work of cyberpunk fiction that has so masterfully delved into. His little drone companion, Koshi, is crazy good in combat too. As I touched on already, Duncan is a huge part of why the main story works. If Gobbet is the big sister of the group, Duncan is your actual brother, and the writing is so good that it comes across as authentic and real. The long history between you two is frequently called back to, and you reflect on what it was like growing up on the streets, life under Raymond, and the struggles and concerns the two of you share. Without a single line of voice acting, he feels like someone you know and could easily pick up a conversation with after years apart, like Garrus from Mass Effect or Regis from Blood and Wine. There's a sense of connection there that very few games ever manage to achieve. Speaking of which, that's one thing I should probably mention. There's no voice acting. I'm sorry to say, there aren't any romances, no fancy cinematic cutscenes. You have the RPG tourist's worst nightmare. You actually have to read. Anyway, I hope I've managed to convey how great the writing in this game is, and how the developers were able to weave in so much personality and choice into a game running on Unity that only has a fraction of big budget studios. Outside the team, it's worth noting how much of a character the city itself is. From the hub area of Huey, with Kindly Cheng that sits within the clacking of a mahjong parlor, to merchants like Spider Shen, Crafty, Ambrose, Maximum Law that other games would just treat as cardboard cutouts, Hong Kong is bursting with so much personality and charm. Beyond how beautiful it is to just look at, there is life around every corner. Stop to talk with a random NPC on the sidewalk and they have something interesting to say. But I suppose it's about time we talk about what you actually do, isn't it? Hong Kong's great writing doesn't just stop at characters, but the sheer mission variety here is gold too. By being handcrafted and not a 1,000-hour open world Skinner box, each and every mission is unique. How about investigating a serial killer, bumping into another lot of Shadowrunners on a job and teaming up to escape? How about a heist and trying to steal as much as you can without raising the alarm? How about kidnapping a gang member from a restaurant and poisoning his main bodyguard's food? How about breaking into a ship during a heavy rainstorm? How about fighting through a floating slum overrun by carnivorous rats? A midnight duel with a vampire on the top level of a skyscraper? There are so many things to see and do, ways to interact with the game's systems, and even little moments of humor as well. One of my favorite things is bringing Gaichu anywhere will sometimes lead to people freaking out at seeing a goal like the party where you're trying to sabotage a rival TV show. That's not all either, because Hong Kong even goes a step further with the extended edition that comes with an epilogue campaign. Much like Throne of Baal, it ties out the story and brings you and all your companions closure in a way that few other games have. You matter. The writing and world feels like you're actually a part of it, and you have a history and reputation, even if it doesn't always work out the way you planned. It's a real shame we haven't got any more Shadowrun games since then. Much like my love for Vampire the Masquerade, despite Paradox's best efforts to drag it through the mud and run the whole World of Darkness into the ground, there's so much potential here that's just waiting to be tapped into. Whether or not Harebrained Schemes will revisit the series, or it could get licensed out to some other studio again, who knows? But Shadowrun Hong Kong will still be there as one of the best, most criminally underrated games, period. Go play it. I want more of these games, damn it.